If you want to write stories your readers will love, there are 3 things you need to do. Understand storytelling principles, see how other writers have applied the principles, and then use them in your own work. Here on the Story Nerd podcast, our goal is to demystify story theory. We'll help you with the first 2 steps so that you can get started with the third. My name is Valerie Francis. I'm a writer and a story editor, and I teach women who are writing in all genres how stories work so they can finish their books faster and without frustration.
And I'm Melanie Hill, editor, poet, and author of middle grade novel Jet Cooper. And I help writers identify and solve their story problems.
On today's episode, Melanie pitched Thunderbolts so that we can study constant characters. This 2025 film was directed by Jake Schreier from a screenplay by screenwriters Eric Pearson and Joanna Callow, based on the Marvel comics. And my apologies if I have pronounced anyone's name incorrectly. Of course, there will be spoilers because we can't talk about this movie without talking about the movie. And as always, we would love it if you could help other writers find our show by simply leaving a rating and review. Apple Podcast listeners, you can do it from your phone. Go to the show's landing page, scroll to the bottom, click the stars, maybe leave a word or two. It is that simple. And if you are watching us on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button so you never miss an episode. All right, Melanie, before we get into our topic this week, I have a question. I am not a Marvel aficionado, so I genuinely do not know what the answer is to my question. I looked at this movie purely from a craft perspective, not from a fan perspective. So you are more versed in the Marvel universe than I am. Do you have any idea whether Thunderbolts was a hit with fans or not? Do you have any sense of that?
I do, and it's an interesting question. And it's interesting because one of my kids is a real Marvel. He's really in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So he's pretty much watched not just all the movies, but all the series that come out as well. So his view is that it's a really good movie and it's one of the better ones that has come out in recent years. So I was curious to see if why he had that opinion. Now, overall, I think the ratings of the movie, it rates fairly highly on critics' websites. But from a box office point of view, this did not do as well as expected. And I actually think there's a number of reasons why. The first one would be that Yelena, Ghost, Walker, and Red Guardian are lesser known characters in the MCU. And I think you have to link them, or you have to have seen them in other movies or in the series to actually understand who they are and why they're relevant in the Marvel universe. And if you don't, then it's just confusing. Like if you don't understand where they come from, I didn't really know who Walker was and he was confusing to me. And so I had to go and ask Sam, well, who's this and how did he get into, who is he? And then he explained to me that he was in one of the series. So great. Just like, okay, right. So he's known to those who are well-versed in it. But unlike the Avengers, because everyone knows who the Avengers were, the original Avengers, these characters aren't as well known. And I think that's a problematic thing for not just the movie, but I also think it's a problematic thing for the MCU, because I didn't know we needed new Avengers. And I don't think that the movie makes a good case for that either. So I think amongst the Marvel diehards, this is probably done quite well. But for those who are either not really in touch with it or come in and out of the Marvel universe, it's probably not. It's probably a hard way to get into it. Does that make sense? I suppose that makes sense for you too, because you are out of it more so than me, and you would have struggled even more. Like, who are some of these characters and where did they come from?
I didn't know who any of these characters were. But here's the big lesson. Here's the big takeaway from this, because I know a lot of novelists will write in a series. So here's the big takeaway for anybody writing a series. It could be a trilogy or 5 books or 25 books. Each book in the series needs to stand alone. So
yes.
that means, and you'll notice this when you're reading in a series, maybe it's book 5, and that could be the first book that someone picks up in the series. You will notice at the beginning of the book, there's a ton of exposition because the author, by necessity, has to catch all the new readers up on what has happened. Like I'm reading Patricia Cornwell now. This is I have no idea. Maybe it's book 25. I haven't got a clue. It's the very first book of hers that I've read. The first several chapters are really exposition heavy. Now, I'm not saying that as a criticism of her. You know, like there's a 3-page scene and all they're doing is taking off in a helicopter. Because that's the surface action. But what's happening while the helicopter's taking off is the main character is thinking back to the past about her niece and about other things that have happened. And this is the way that Cornwell is bringing new readers up to speed on the backstory. And she has to do that. So I'm not criticizing her for it. I mean, I don't know how else to do it except through exposition. And if you want to avoid an info dump, you really need to know how to do exposition. And you really need to know what the readers need to know and when they need to know it. So if you're writing a series, really brush up on your exposition skills because you're going to need them. Anyway, we haven't even started our topics of study and we're already digressing. So I'm going to be quiet now and I'm going to let you talk about constant characters.
All right. Now, this movie's ensemble cast offers us a chance to compare change characters alongside constant characters. And I was looking back over my notes last night, and we also did this a little bit in last week's episode, Conclave. But this movie has more constant characters in it than Conclave did. So it actually gives us more of an opportunity to do a comparison. So what is fascinating then is that the constant characters aren't in conflict with the change characters. They actually complement each other and they complement the story overall. Now, The Thunderbolts is an origin movie, so it explains how this group of anti-heroes become the new Avengers. And with most movies in the MCU, the first in a series is usually has the main character coming into their power. And this movie is no different. So Yelena Belova is the central character along with Bob. And he becomes sort of a superpowered villain, sort of in the movie-ish. Valerie will probably go into this a little bit more in her section of the podcast, so I'll just leave that alone. But they are really the change characters in this movie. But they aren't the object of my study. So the rest of the cast, however, are pretty much constant characters. Now, just a quick summary of the theory. The internal beliefs and values of constant characters remain the same. Now, when they are faced with external problems, what this means is that they make the same decision or they take the same decision over and over again because they have a consistent value system or they have a consistent belief system. And we start to see that in the way that they make decisions. So in this movie, the constant characters, where they're really strong, because there are some constant characters that are stronger than others, they have a very consistent view of the world. Now, let's start with Red Guardian. He is a Fezzik-like character in this movie. Now, if you don't know what I mean by that, go back and listen to our What Went Right episode of season 16, where we studied The Princess Bride, because I go through some really interesting things about Fezzik as a character and what his role in the movie is. Now, Red Guardian was Yelena's father while they were a family undercover. So they were a Soviet undercover family, a fake family that were planted into the US, a bit like the Americans. And if you didn't know that, it's because that's in Black Widow. So Black Widow is the precursor to this movie. So I saw your face there, Val. I could see the puzzle. But yeah, so he is not her father biologically, but he is her father in role. Now, this is a role that he wants to maintain. So his role in the movie is to form a family around Yelena and help her find her calling, or her higher calling. He knows that she is lost and lonely after losing her sister, Black Widow, and he is very clear about what he is, or his role in the movie, or his role in her life from the start. Now, he covers it up by wanting to be, work for the Contessa or Valentina, but really he is concerned about her. He takes the role on as a father, and he knows that if she belongs to a group, or she is doing something or using her powers for good instead of bad, that she will then find the light that she's lost. And by the end of the movie, he is proven right. Yelena needs a team or a family so that she can belong. He also wants to be part of the ensemble so that he can relive his glory days, because he is, like Winter Soldier and Captain America, kind of chemically made superhero. So that is what he wants to do. He wants to be of use and to be a champion of the people. Now, Red Guardian's motivation, his decision-making, and his vision are consistent with this throughout the movie. So he is actually, I think, the strongest constant character in the film, and he adds a really nice contrast to Yelena. So he guides Yelena towards finding herself again. And this is really fascinating. So he has the role in the movie of being a mentor. And that fits really nicely with being a constant character, because if you go and have a look at a lot of mentors in films, you'll probably find that most of them are constant characters. So I'll just leave that there. Right. We'll go and look at the rest of the Thunderbolts. There's Walker, Ghost, and Bucky is Winter Soldier, and they are also constant characters. Now, Bucky is a well-established character in the MCU, and despite a slight deviation as a congressman, he reprises his role as a superhero halfway through the movie. So there's not really much to say about him, I don't think, in this movie, because he is well known. Most people know who he is, and he just reverts to type. Then there's Walker, and he plays a shamed Captain America. So he is the real anti-hero of the group. He's an also well-developed character in the MCU because he appeared in the series The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, his values and motivation remain the same throughout the Thunderbolts too. Now, like I said at the top of the episode, I don't really know much about Walker. I had to go and ask my son and also do a little bit of research. But he's pretty much a constant character, and his story has been told in that series that I mentioned. And then finally, there's Ghost. She first appeared in Ant-Man and the Wasp as the villain, but her biological instability was fixed in that movie, and then she found herself working for the Contessa, or Valentina de Fontaine. So that, again, there's not really much to say about Ghost. She doesn't change very much. Apart from doing a few really cool tricks, she doesn't do a great deal in this movie. But I imagine as we go forward with the new Avengers, she'll have more action and a little bit more of a role to play. But in this movie, she's very constant. And then there's the Contessa. So she is also a constant character and one of the villains. Now, alongside Red Guardian, the motivation behind her decisions remains consistent for the entire movie, and it is made really obvious from the start. What she does well is pivot and adapt through the story to the circumstances that she has, but that is all external. Her internal values and belief systems remain the same, and it is all centered around her getting power. And there's a little bit of a backstory there that is even just It all has to do with Black Panther and Wakanda. And anyway, just know that she wants power. So she's a constant character, and I think will continue to remain a constant character going forward. Now, Bucky, Walker, and Ghost's consistency contrast the arcs that Yelena and Bob have. They are in this movie to provide that contrast, as well as establish a new group of misfit anti-superheroes without taking the attention away from Yelena and Bob. Now, during this season, I've also talked about story arcs, which is all about how the characters change or don't change the world that they occupy. So story arcs can be optimistic, ambivalent, or pessimistic, depending on a character's ability to influence that world. Now, I would say that the story arc for the Thunderbolts movie is ambivalent because the world hasn't changed as a result of the team becoming the new Avengers. And while the outcome of the individual characters is positive, the story arc is not. Valentina has switched the script and avoided being held accountable for her role in nefarious anti-government activities. But she has not made a case for why the new Avengers are needed. And I think this is why I have judged that the story arc is ambivalent, because it probably links into other story problems in that there is really no global inciting incident. This is really about Yelena and then Bob on the side. So it tends to be a more internal story, and that's where most of the change happens. With regards to the external world, it pretty much stays the same. And it'll be interesting to see what happens next in the new Avengers movie when the Fantastic Four come in. If you're not into the post-credit scenes, you won't know what I mean. I really like watching the post-credit scenes in Marvel movies. Now, like I mentioned, the world doesn't seem to need the new Avengers. And when Bob is Void, so that's the dark character that he becomes, he is actually only a threat to the people in his vicinity. He didn't morph into a global or universal threat at all, although he could have, but at no point was he ever a threat to the bigger world at large. Now, you could argue that the world has returned to a safe state because Void has been defeated, but the creation of the new Avengers is posed as a solution to a problem that no one knew that they had from a story point of view. So it is just a convenience for the Contessa. And she pivots and flips depending on the opportunities that are presented to her. So that's my assessment of how the change characters were supported, I should say, by the constant characters in this movie. How did you go this week with the speech in praise of the villain?
Okay, before I get into the speech, I just want to add to what I said off the top in terms of people writing in a series. If you are going to write a series the way that Marvel is presenting these films, in that you are requiring your audience to watch every single film and to be deeply immersed, you are requiring readers, in our case as novelists, to make a decision early on. Either they're going to commit 10 or 15 or 20 years of their life in your stories, or they're not. Like, they're either in or they're out from the beginning. And you're going to find a lot more people will be out, because that's a commitment. Like when Marvel movies started to come out, I liked them, like the original Captain America and the original Iron Man. They were kind of fun. I thought, this is great. And pretty soon I got lost. And that's when my kids explained to me, no, Mom, you have to watch everything. I'm like, I got stuff to do. Like, I have a life. No. So I was out. Therefore, very confused. So I'm saying that as a caveat before I go into my spiel, which is considerable. You might want to put me on 1.5 times speed to to get through it. All my comments are based on this movie in isolation because that's all I know. If you are a huge Marvel fan, you might disagree with things that I'm saying because you have knowledge that I don't. And hey, fair play. Fair play to you. I am commenting only on the information as presented in this film in isolation because I like stories, but I just am not watching all of this Marvel stuff. All right. So, as Melanie said this season, I am studying the speech in praise of the villain. And just to recap the theory very quickly on this one, the speech in praise of the villain is the way that you let your reader, or in this case, a viewer, know that the antagonist is a formidable opponent. It doesn't actually have to be a speech per se. It can be delivered by any character in the story or multiple characters in the story. It can occur once or multiple times throughout the story. And the term villain applies to any antagonist or force of antagonism that you're using in your story. So this is a super flexible tool. You can use it however you need to. The point is that you need to make sure your audience or your reader understands that your protagonist is up against something or someone significant. Of course, it presupposes that you, as the creator, are clear about who your antagonist is. And I think that's where the filmmakers of Thunderbolts either, like, this is where they ran into problems. Either they weren't clear about who their antagonist was, or they misunderstood the function of the core event. Now, if the core event is a new topic for you, if you've never heard that term before, or if you want a refresher, go back to season 14 because there's 10 episodes where I'm going on and on about the core event. All right. Basically, it's the climax of your story. Thunderbolts is a superhero movie, so I think we can safely stick to the term villain here. So that's what I'm going to use pretty much throughout. The issue here in this movie is that they set up one character as the villain, but then in the core event or the climax of the story, they suddenly swapped out that character that they told us was the villain for another character. And that doesn't work. I'm just telling you right now, go ahead and try it. It ain't going to work. It's going to tick your readers off, just like I'm ticked off. Let me explain to you what I'm talking about. There's a rant, and I'm trying not to rant, but I can feel it welling up inside me. All right. Valentina is clearly established in the first act, which is the beginning hook of your story, as the villain. Throughout the entire middle build of the story, she continues to function as the villain of the story. In fact, for a full 80% of the movie, Valentina is the villain. Then, at the core event, which is supposed to be when the hero and the villain face off, all of a sudden, she's not the villain anymore. The villain now switches from Valentina to Bob / the Sentry, or eventually the Void. Is that what you called him? I mean, this is Bob's shadow self. So this would have been a great movie for us to have done when we did our study of the shadow. It's literally, he becomes a shadow. I roared out loud laughing. It's everything in this movie is so on the nose. To me, it almost felt like a spoof. So I kind of watched it as a spoof and I enjoyed it more. All right. Now I want to pause here for a second to be clear about something. Melanie is laughing at me because she just knows I'm holding back on a full-on rant. But let me just be clear here. The protagonist. Oh, okay. Be serious. I am a professional. Let me be professional.
Pull it together. Come on.
Get it together, Val. Okay. Now, a couple of minutes ago, Melanie talked about the role of the mentor. This is really important because there are characters take on certain roles in stories, and the protagonist and the antagonist are both roles that characters play in a story, right? Just like the mentor or the herald, and there's a whole bunch of them. These roles are not character specific. In fact, it is entirely possible for them to change from one character to the other. So you could have one mentor at the beginning of a story, and then because of the needs of your story and the way you're structuring your story, that role of mentor might need to switch to another character somewhere along the line. That is not a problem. However, this is not something that you want to do lightly. You want to give it a lot of thought. And if roles must switch to other characters, then you want to do it in non-core scenes, especially if you want to switch the role of the protagonist and the role of the antagonist. So what I mean by non-core scenes, these are scenes that are not part of the main story structure. They're not part of the spine of your story. Because if you do it in those scenes, your story as a whole will be weaker. And the core event is one of the main scenes in a story. I mean, it's the moment your reader or viewer is waiting for. If you've written a book that's 80 or 100,000 words, it might take them a month or 2 months to read the book. They are sticking with your book for a couple of months of their lives to get to this moment. And if you switch out who the villain is, and now the protagonist is somehow facing off with some other character, you're going to make them mad. You're going to make them mad, and you're going to get 1-star reviews. I'm just telling you right now. Okay. You as the author of your story, you're spending a lot of time and creative effort getting your reader to connect emotionally with your main character. This is not an easy thing to do. It is not. So if you switch who the main character is, you're back to square one. You have got to reestablish an emotional connection. That's not easy for you creatively, for a whole bunch of reasons that I don't have time to go into right now. But it's also not easy for the story because you've got to stop telling the main story to reestablish an emotional connection. I could talk for 2 hours just on that point. I will keep moving on. The same is true of the antagonist. You're spending a lot of time establishing that this particular antagonist is a massive threat to that particular protagonist or the protagonist's world. So changing who the protagonist is or who the antagonist is not something that you're going to want to do lightly. The core scenes of your story, what they're doing is telling the story of your protagonist doing battle with your antagonist. That's the story spine. That's the story you're telling. This character is going up against this character, and stuff happens in the core event. Like that's it in a nutshell. So all of this to say that Thunderbolts established Valentina as the villain and then suddenly swapped her out for Bob's shadow self in the last 20% of the film. So I will look at both of these characters to see how or if the writers established them both as formidable opponents for Yelena, who is, as Melanie said, the primary protagonist, or for the fictional world, which presumably is the whole of the United States. And I mean, the fact that I'm saying presumably indicates another huge problem in this film, but I got to keep moving on or we'll never get out of this episode. People will be finished their treadmill walk and I'll still be talking. Okay. About 5 minutes in, I'm going to start with Valentina. About 5 minutes into the movie, there's a scene that's an impeachment hearing. And Valentina is the one being impeached. And Congressman Gary says the following, quote, "At this moment, you, Valentina, are serving as the director of the CIA. And before that, you were the chairwoman of the board of Ox Group. The Ox Group maintains significant holdings in unregulated labs, in foreign labs, and rumored human experimentation, all part of an illegal operation to develop your own super person." So this is the first time that we meet Valentina in this whole film. So the filmmakers are immediately establishing her as powerful. She's the director of the CIA. She's the chairwoman of the board of Ox Group. And she's building her own super person? Come on. Now, I did not know what Ox Group was. I had to look it up. But even if you don't know what Ox Group is, it's clear that she is a person of considerable power. Now, Ox Group, for those of you who, like me, who don't know and don't particularly care, according to my Google search, Ox Group is, quote, a shadowy holding company, an organization in the Marvel Universe founded by Valentina to fund, manage, and conceal her off-the-books illegal Black Ops operations. Essentially, Ox functions as a modern, Val-controlled alternative to organizations like Hydra or Oscorp, I don't know what those are either, focusing on illegal, high-level espionage and the weaponization of secrets and the superpowered individuals. So, pretty serious villain things. All right. The point here is that Valentina is established the moment we meet her as formidable. Now, 5 minutes after that, at 10 minutes into the movie, Alexei praises Valentina. He says, quote, I would burn the city to the ground to work for her. Give to me her number, I call. I'm still a soldier in his prime. Maybe you could put in a good word with Valentina for me. So she's so great, he wants to work for her. Now, Alexei's, I thought daughter, Yelena, she does work for Valentina. And Alexei both admires it and envies it. So at first, in the impeachment hearing, we saw her peer, right, a congressman, another government official, praise her. And by praise, I mean talk about how powerful she is. Now we see a character who is inferior to her in terms of official government power and societal power and in the sort of hierarchy of U.S. social structure. Alexei is inferior to her, and he is praising her as well. Now, at 24 minutes in, the Winter Soldier delivers his speech in praise of the villain. So first we had a peer, then we have an underling, and now we have a superhero. All praise her, because even though Alexei has superpowers, he's not yet a superhero. This is part of his shtick. He wants to be part of a superhero group. He wants to actually work as a superhero instead of a limo driver. Winter Soldier, Bucky, he is a bona fide superhero. There is no question about this at all. And he simply says, quote, you don't know what Val is capable of. We need to move fast. Now, and if that wasn't enough, at 32 minutes into the film, Valentina's personal assistant, Mel, and this is the closest character to Valentina. Hey, we have a Val and a Mel. I just noticed that. And they're both evil, villainy people.
When art imitates real life, right?
Oh my God. You have no idea. You don't want to see our shadow sides. All right. Get it together, Mel. Get it together.
This is why we're both wearing black today.
Oh, we are. Look at that. We're both wearing black.
It's because we're bringing out our shadow selves.
It's cosplay. This is the closest I get to cosplay. Oh my God. Okay. So at 32 minutes in, Valentina's personal assistant, Mel, and she is the closest character to Valentina. She knows her the best. Mel also talks about Val's power. The Winter Soldier wants Mel to testify against Valentina, but Mel knows that he cannot protect her against Val. So even a superhero is not powerful enough to stop Valentina. That's all in the first act of the movie. I mean, there are many other examples, but, time's ticking on here, so I'll move on to Bob now, because, like I said, suddenly he's the villain in the core event. What's important to remember here is that the speech in praise of the villain isn't only about indicating how powerful or superior a character is. It's about how formidable the character is. And by that I mean how great a threat they pose to the protagonist or the worlds of the protagonist. So it's about establishing a threat. So this concept of a threat is really important because remember, this is all about the stakes in the story. The protagonist wants something, but someone or something is standing in the way of her getting it. And if she stands to lose something, something is at risk, right? There's something at stake there. Now, I talked about all of this in the 4-story questions that I covered in season 13. So if that's new to you or you want a refresher, go back to season 13 and listen to those episodes. So for Bob to make sense as a villain, he needs to pose a threat to Yelena and her object of desire, which he does not. But anyway, I'm going to keep moving on. At 28 minutes into the movie, we discover that Bob can read minds. But that skill in and of itself doesn't signal that he's superior. It shows he has a superpower, but so does everybody else he's with in that scene. It shows that his superpower is different than theirs, but it doesn't establish that it is superior to theirs. In fact, he is very clearly established as being inferior to Yelena and Ghost and the bad Captain America. Walker, that's his name. Yelena, in fact, thinks that he's just a civilian, and that's what she calls him. And civilians, for superheroes, are weaklings that need to be protected. So Yelena tells Bob to stand behind her when they try to make their escape so that she can protect him. So he is established as someone who is in need of protection. At 37 minutes in, we learn that Bob is the only survivor of the Sentry Project tests. Now, this does make him remarkable, absolutely. And yes, it definitely indicates some kind of power or fortitude, but it doesn't constitute a threat. At 50 minutes in, which is just before the halfway point, Bob survives the firing range and then he flies into outer space or jumps or something. Clearly then, it is obvious that Bob has significant superpowers. But remember, we're discovering these superpowers because he has sacrificed himself to help the Thunderbolt team, not to harm them. So the filmmakers are establishing him over and over and over as an ally, not an enemy. This is completely opposed to the way Valentina is established. At 1 hour, which is in the second half of the movie, and remember, there's nothing new after Act 2, right? So there's nothing new after the 50% point of your story. We get something new. Mel says, quote, Al, something happened in Malaysia. Have you read Bob's file? Delusions of grandeur, depression. Someone that imbalanced, amplified by the treatment. The people in the labs, they were just test subjects. They were never going to be the one. You put a serum into someone like Steve Rogers, he becomes Captain America. But if you do it to someone this unstable, who knows what it will do to him? This is the first indication that Bob, as the Sentry, might be something other than what they had planned. However, we, as the audience, aren't worried. We're not thinking he's a villain because he has been so well established as harmless, as a harmless entity who, if anything, is a friend to the Thunderbolts. And in fact, if he is a friend to the Thunderbolts, that is worrisome for Valentina because that's exactly the opposite of what she has in mind. So it's reinforcing Bob as an ally. At 1 hour, 9 minutes, we get a restatement of everything we already know about Bob. The Winter Soldier says, quote, yes, I got it. He's very, very scary. And I said to myself, he's scary? Wait a minute. Why is he scary? Nothing about Bob to this point has indicated to us that he's scary or a threat. And the Winter Soldier, as he says that, almost says it tongue in cheek, like he doesn't seem to be particularly scared. In fact, Bob is a bit of a sad sack here, right? He's a sad sack who is willing to sacrifice himself for his newly found friends. This is when Mel calls the Winter Soldier and she says, quote, "Bucky, I need your help. Val has gone off the rails. I mean, Project Sentry is not just a failure, it's dangerous. She has too much power in her hands, and this guy is a disaster waiting to happen. Bring anyone, everyone you can." So here again, Mel is reinforcing that Valentina is the villain and that Bob / the Sentry in her hands could be dangerous. Maybe not. Maybe he's just a dud. We don't know. But it's in her hands. She is still the villain. He is a tool for her to maybe wield, maybe not. So eventually we then have a scene where all the Thunderbolts meet the Sentry. And guess what? He's not dangerous to them. He does not want to fight them. He could kill them all. He has the power. But he doesn't. All he does is defend himself when they attack. But he doesn't harm any of them. They all can get up and easily walk out, which, by the way, they do. They get in the elevator and go downstairs and walk out onto the street. And they're fine. I don't even think they have any scratches, and he could have killed them. So he is still an ally to them. Because Valentina would have liked him to kill them, and he does not. He turns on Valentina. Now, it's only when Bob pushes back against Valentina's control that his shadow side emerges. And guess what? All of that happens off stage. It is not on the screen. OMFG. This movie drives me bonkers. Now, I'm sure this was some big twist. And hey, if you're really immersed in the Marvel Universe, maybe it's a twist that works for you. I am absolutely willing to accept that. But if you look at this movie in isolation, as I did, this is not working as a twist. I just have to say that right now. So, all of this to say, Thunderbolts offers up two villains, Valentina and Bob / the Sentry. However, Bob isn't much of a villain. Although he certainly has powers, he is not a threat to Elena or the world that she is in and all the others are in. Valentina is the threat that's clearly established by 4 different characters in the first act of the story through 4 different speeches in praise of the villain. I'm just going to stop there. I tried to be concise. I only skimmed the surface because the whole ending is wackadoodle, but I will just leave it there right now. And if anyone with this knowledge wants to rewatch the movie and consider how it ends in light of everything Melanie and I have said, that would be really insightful. You would learn a lot by that exercise. Okay. Melanie, what are your final thoughts with respect to constant characters in Thunderbolts?
Well, the constant characters in the movie are there to support the 2 change characters, and this is important. Constant characters are a contrast to the change characters, but they also fill archetypal roles like mentor, the villain, or unlikely allies. And when your protagonist is a change character, you do need constant characters around them, and you'll find them everywhere.
Well, that wraps it up for this week. And it also wraps it up for the season. So join us again next week when we offer up our best advice for creating constant characters and including the speech and praise of the villain in your story. To support the show, please leave us a rating and review and tell your writer friends about us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. For the power to write a best-selling story, visit storynerd.ca/courses. To join my inner circle, go to valeriefrancis.ca/inner circle. And for more information about Melanie's books, visit melaniehill.au. And remember, story theory doesn't have to be difficult. It's a tool to help you write more, not less. So take it one step at a time and have fun.